are back listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Collington. Joining me, as always, Mr. Kevin Durso. Kevin, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Got a lot of Flyers talk to get into this week. We got 3 games to break down, a little bit of a preview going into next week. As we're diving into that, make sure to follow us on social media at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Find us everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. So, diving right in. The big story this week, for more than one reason, is Sam Ersson. And I think we should start by breaking down his performance on Tuesday night.
Okay.
Because, man, the Flyers played a good game. It was a solid, for the most part, a solid 60-minute effort. You know, you played decent hockey. You didn't have a whole lot of shots on goal. But
we'll get into it.
Sam Ersson was your star of that game, for sure, 100%.
Absolutely. I mean, you don't win a game without Sam Ersson playing the way he does. It was it's as simple as that. I mean, I don't have any other real way to describe the 2 wins. It's straight out of the book of this team. When you have games where you take 19, 20 shots and score 2 goals total in each game, you don't win without.
It's not going to be good enough. Yeah.
Right. You don't win without your goaltender. And it's as simple as that.
Absolutely. And he looked really sharp early on. He was tested early. The Flyers gave up 11 shots in the first period. The Flyers took 2 penalties, 5-on-3 right away, pretty early in that game for more than a minute, about a minute and a half, and they killed it off.
Yeah.
It was a really solid effort out of the penalty killing unit as a whole that night. But obviously, Sam Ersson is a big part of that. The
penalty killing being to me the one other bright spot out of the collection of games, honestly.
What will every announcer tell you? Who's your best penalty killer?
Well, of course, I get that, but it's
always your goalie. Yep.
Yeah, but you know what? Even in his 2 wins this week, he didn't have, like, I remember doing shows early in the year last year where we would sit there and say, well, the only reason they won the game is because Carter Hart or because of, and sometimes Sam Ersson too, but we would sit there and then talk about a game where it was, Carter Hart made 37 saves. Sam Ersson made 35 saves, something like that, because they just gave up shots in volume. These were not that kind of game. Like you had a game, I think it was the one in Boston anyway, where they ended up with, I think, 28 block shots to go with the 23 saves Ersson makes. So not even like Ersson makes 23 saves and more shots get blocked that don't get through to him. So that's where the collective effort comes in. And that's partially that, that's where the 5-on-3 thing comes in and where the penalty kill's good is that they block a lot of shots. And when they do, that's what helps them potentially win a game. That's why I even said, we can talk about Ersson to a degree, and we can, and there's a bigger story involving Ersson as we get through the course of the week. I get it, but we're going to get into probably more topics that have to do with the deficiencies of why this doesn't last more than it does why it does. If nothing else, all that those 2 games prove is something that I've backed up for the better part of the last year, that Ersson's starter quality. You cannot deny that part. He's starter quality. When he's on his game like that, he can play like a starter.
Sam Ersson, obviously barring injury and other career things, could be a starter in the NHL for the majority of his career. He is an NHL caliber goaltender. I will say this week, I know we're going to talk a lot about the deficiencies of the offense and kind of what has looked poor, but I do also want to point out while we're talking about it, the defensive structure has looked better this week.
Sure.
The penalty killing, as we talked about, has been solid. They've been better in the face-off dot. So while, there's a long way to go, right? And the Flyers are still a long way from being a good team. I do want to point out that, some of the things we saw that first week or so of the season when the team was still missing Nick Seeler, a lot of that has kind of started to come around a little bit. Obviously, you're missing Cam York, and I think I saw a clip of him skating yesterday. So
there was, yeah.
Right. But
I don't know what the hell that means, by the way. They said 2 weeks minimum, so hopefully that just means it's on the shorter term of that, and that's all there is to it. But
all I'm taking from that is that he is on the ice, and I think that's a good thing. That's all.
And I'll deduct that because it was exactly 1 week after the initial update, so
That was our evaluation skate.
He might be halfway to that recovery point. He was able to get on the ice. They let him skate by himself. And then maybe you're another, is it crazy to think that because they said minimum of 2 weeks and then we'll check? Is it crazy to think he doesn't play on the road trip and then is back the following Monday when they're home again for pretty much the rest of the month practically? I mean, they go on, 2 road games for the rest of the month after that?
I think that's pretty reasonable. At least to have him home at some point, right? Even if he's not ready for that first game, if he's on the road back and kind of maybe in a morning skate or takes warm-ups or something along those lines. But it is nice to see. Going back to kind of my other point was that it is nice to see that the team has cleaned some of that early season stuff up a little bit. Obviously, like I said, there is still a ton to do. We will get into some of the lack of goal scoring as we move on. But
yeah,
I did want to point out some of the good things kind of early on that you did win 2 out of 3 this week. It wasn't an overall terrible week. I feel like last week we had a bit of a weird show because there were some bad games, a couple wins mixed in, but it was mostly like a pretty bad week. And I feel like a lot of that carries over.
No,
but
what I
this
think
was honestly not a terrible week.
Because what you're talking about is that basically, with the exception of winning one of those early season crazy high scoring games against Minnesota, they lost the rest of the week, and it wasn't like
awful.
and not lost well, like bad losses, almost
like complete passes, barely look like hockey players.
Well, and here's the thing: they could have they win a couple of games, and if they would have lost Saturday this week more competitively, it felt like. I think we'd have a more positive show. I almost wouldn't even address the lack of scoring as much because it would have felt like they were more like there was a period, like there was a certain point where I think probably after the second Boston goal on Saturday, I already knew they're not in this game.
So the thing is, I think, and sure, this might have some to do with it, but I think for the back half of that game, they were the better team. They were pushing down Boston. They were trying to get shots on goal, and
I agree with you.
Korpisalo played really well.
I agree with you for the rest of the second period. The third period was as boring as it gets for both sides.
Yeah,
that was
a little bit
to be honest with you. If I was evaluating all 3 of the teams I saw this week, meaning Boston twice, the Flyers, all 3 games, in St. Louis, all 3 are boring and mediocre teams. Like I've changed, like I kind of saw, I saw all the stuff going on with Boston for the last week and a half about how the slow start and Montgomery's might be on the hot seat.
People were looking at this game as a Montgomery
must win
or a bust.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah. And even then, it's not the cleanest game for them. I don't remember watching a game when Boston comes into town where I come out of it going, David Pastrnak wasn't the best player on the ice and Brad Marchand wasn't the best. They contributed, but let's be real. Marchand, if not for setting it's the end of a shift when Marchand scores. So he sets up a goal at the end of a shift as they complete a line change. And Pastrnak got it. One is then Marchand scores the empty netter at the end, which is an empty netter.
Which he wasn't even trying to shoot, really.
Pretty much. And Pastrnak gets an assist. So I'm going, you tell me the last time the Flyers played the Bruins twice in the same week or twice in a short period of time and didn't give up at least 2 goals to Pastrnak, at least 3 points to Pastrnak and Marchand. You tell me the last time that happened, because to see 2 games happen this week against a team that Pastrnak just destroys and come away with 1 assist total. Since when? Right?
And a pretty useless assist at that, all things considered.
Their best line, Boston's best line was their 4th line in Saturday's game by far. As you watched, as I'm watching Justin Brazeau outplay David Pastrnak, essentially.
Man, you know what? I know he's only been in the league for a little while now, but I feel like Brazeau has a large percentage of his career goals against the Flyers.
Well, he scored 1 last year and 1 last year, or 2 last year. I think it was both. He scored in both.
At least 2. Right.
Well, I think it was both games at the end of the year in March. He scored in Boston, then in Philly. And then,
no disrespect, but how many career goals just
no, but this is how I knew, this is how I knew problems were surfacing for that team, because I didn't think anything of it at first. I don't follow the Bruins every single day. I don't know if the guy is just that good now, after a year that he's playing second line minutes or whatever. I found out, no, that was a trial. We're going to throw Brazeau on the second line for that game on Tuesday in Boston, because we're throwing stuff at the wall.
I mean, fair enough.
I didn't know that, though. So I'm finding that out and I'm going, Oh, that's like that's like sitting here saying, and if you're in the Flyers position, that's like taking a guy like Garnet Hathaway, who you know is not a second liner, and saying, you know what, though? He's playing better than blank, blank, and blank, so he's elevated to second line because I need somebody who's generating something, right? Like,
So I looked at Justin Brazeau, by the way, has 8 career NHL goals. So yes, a significant portion against the Philadelphia Flyers.
absolutely.
And then also,
I'm double
Kevin,
checking.
I have a question for you. When exactly did Danny Briere leave Maine? I have a question for you.
When did he leave?
Yeah,
I want to
because
say it was the summer between, the summer like that he got the special assistant job. So it was the
okay.
summer before. I guess that was the summer before Chuck Fletcher got fired. So I want to say it was summer of 22 is what I think that happened.
Justin Brazeau
Uh-huh.
played 18 games for the Maine Mariners in 21-22.
Interesting.
Yep. And by the way, in 18 games, had 10 goals, 10 assists for 20 points. I know it's the ECHL. There's now a player who's in the NHL. But I just want to point that out. That's an interesting little
It's
tidbit for
okay.
Danny Briere
It's
and
actually
Justin
a
Brazeau.
little. So, and I just looked it up. It's actually a little later than what I thought. So it's
Oh, okay.
actually says partway through the 21-22 season. So
Oh,
he
so through
was,
the 21-22 season. Okay.
well, yes,
Okay.
because he was, okay, right. Okay, so actually, I'm sorry. Then that would be
It would
earlier
have
than
been
I thought.
before, right?
Right, slightly earlier. You know what? I think it
Okay, so
was,
they may have been there at the same time. They may not have. I don't know when he played his 18 games because
well,
he did play 51 in the AHL as well.
when Brazeau played in Maine.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, because he played 51 games for the AHL Providence Bruins that year as well. So I don't know exactly when those 18 games were.
I
But
want to see. I want to say though that Briere making the move came when it says part way. I don't think that means a dead halfway point. I think
it
that was
was
like
closer
March.
to the end of the season. Yeah.
It was like February,
And
March when he made that jump.
it's just an interesting little connection there between Danny Briere and Justin Brazeau. But all right. So let's talk about that Tuesday game and let's talk about the guy who did actually score because
Right. Well,
Tyson
he
Forster Tyson Forster's coming, man. I I
that's
I've
okay.
seen it this and I know okay. And I say that in the sense of I say that like I say that Owen Tippett's coming. He is a guy who's going to shoot the puck. He is a guy who's going to be aggressive, who's going to start putting it on net, and is a goal scorer. Pucks will go in eventually.
I mean,
I
I
don't know
hear,
this. I don't have the advanced stats, but I have to imagine the Flyers PDO is bad this year, right?
but here's the thing. I get where you're coming from. They've got guys who can score, and John Tortorella said something to this sort a little bit after Saturday. You can't tell people who watch this team on a night in, night out basis that like the guys who miss the net with regularity, that don't get a lot of shots to begin with, it feels like that just because this guy was a 27 goal scorer or this guy scored 20 last year or whatever the case may be, it's, well, where the hell are they? That's the message. It like, I hope that Forrester scoring on Tuesday unlocks something. I didn't care that it was an empty net goal at the end for Joel Farabee. I hope that unlocks something. Bobby Brink scored on Thursday. I hope that unlocks something. These are the guys that you need to start finding things out about, and it better happen to like honestly, I don't recall whether or not I wrote this down in my notes or not, but like I'm starting to get to the point where I'm wondering if like you have until the end of November to get some of this ironed out to a degree before people just completely are like, because there's people who are already there. And I'm like trying to pump the brakes maybe a little bit in my head, going like, all right, when we get to 20 games and you're a quarter of the way through another season and the same things are happening for the same guys, then like, yeah, I can't defend that any further. But, you
Well,
know,
and obviously this is a bigger issue that we will get into. We have a whole tab for it and stuff. But like you scored 4 goals this week, but 3 of them came from the group that you want to be scoring, right? These
yeah,
young kids.
and I feel like where you're trying to come from with this is that for a change after the game that they had, like Michkov went cold for a little bit.
For sure. I mean,
Has gone 4
your
games without a point, and
your production this week didn't come from your Couturiers or your Konechnys or your Michkovs. Like it did come from your younger guys, your depth, your like if the Philadelphia Flyers are going to be a good team eventually, Tyson Forster's a really good middle six winger. he's not a super duper star, but he's a really, really good depth piece type of thing is what I'm saying.
And I get that.
And
I'm getting to the point though where like they need to have 9 guys who at minimum push 30 points and do it.
I agree.
Do it fairly easily. Like
well,
if I'm still I hope so, because I'm telling you right now, so far, if I'm still sitting here in another 3 weeks and the November's almost over and I'm still looking at guys in single digits who have put together another 7 games without getting anything, that's problematic. Like
I agree.
Especially for a team that was supposed to get like for all the other things that maybe not ready to go and may go wrong this year that keep them in the position that they're going to be in. They were supposed to get a shot in the arm from Michkov being there in some capacity. Not necessarily that he has to do it all, but that he brings an element where it's like either like I heard some like, and this is an interesting time. Maybe we'll take this and turn this into, because the goal scoring thing is a bigger discussion. Like I don't really have much on the games themselves as much because it's because the whole thing is an underlying theme. But maybe this will tie into the Sam Ersson thing, because I heard somebody bring up something along the lines of I think it was on Flyers Daily. I think Jason Martinez said it. Is it crazy to think? Oh no, it was during an intermission report on radio. Is it crazy to think that Sam Ersson maybe didn't have the best game on Saturday against Minnesota, let up a couple, loses a couple of games leading up to that point, right? Is it crazy to think that all of a sudden Kolosov shows up and is now back into that battle a little bit, and you have a new rotation that forms, and Ersson now takes it and runs with it? Because even before Saturday, like before we get to the bigger part of Saturday's game, he's perfect then too. Good saves right out of the gate, clearly sharp. Rest of the team's not sharp. He is though, so he was on his way to having probably a stellar week. I mean, like, and he still did, but like, looked like he was like, gets the shutout against Boston, looks like he might get a shutout against St. Louis, and started off sharp against Boston again in another, what looked like another goalie duel. And it's like, all right, did all of a sudden this kid showing up? Because I was genuinely, I want to say surprised. I knew it was going to be Ersson on Saturday to get the start because of how he had won the previous 2. But I was wondering at some point, it's like, you didn't just call up Kolosov to try to let him figure it out by sitting on a bench. He's got to play.
It is worth noting, by the way, since we're into the goalie conversation, that Kolosov did sit on the bench for all 3 games. Ended up needing to come in on Saturday.
Well,
Fedotov,
right, we'll just get to
has not seen the bench this week. The only time Fedotov suited up during the only time Fedotov suited up during a game this week was he suited up on Saturday as an emergency backup. But
this week, his last game backing up was Saturday, right?
Right.
Because that was the day that a lot of the Kolosov stuff was stirring a little bit. They got him up here for Sunday. He played Sunday, and then I like. My thought was, because my thought was I thought he was going to get the St. Louis game, honestly, because I thought that was the Boston's Boston. Regardless of how they look to start the year, you always know what's possible. So I figured Ersson got Tuesday because you knew that was going to happen, and then after he shuts them out, he's going to get Saturday.
And I think Ersson's performance Tuesday probably also gets him Thursday.
Probably, and then Thursday just even further gets him Saturday.
Because now he's the hot hand.
My thing was that the question that was being floated around was, so does he get and obviously now this is a totally different conversation, but the question was, does he get all 3 on the road trip? And I'm sitting there going, listen, I think it's possible because of the fact that that's how they go with this. If he's a hot hand, they're going to ride the hot hand. John Tortorella, I think right now more than anything, because this is how he's going to work, is trying to string together wins.
Like points. Right. You're trying to accumulate points, and I don't even think it matters. You had early in the last season,
but I don't even think it matters from like trying to look at playoff perspectives or anything like that to take a step forward. I think it's just a matter of you go out and start a year, whatever it was, 1-6-1 or 2-6-1. I think it was 1-5-1, 2-6-1 is what it was.
Yeah, pretty bad.
You just want to get, I just got a shutout win for my 3rd win. Goalie looked good again to get me my 4th win. I'm trying for number 5 and 3 in a row, because then that makes this room feel good about itself.
Absolutely. Trying to get some points on the board, not from a playoff perspective.
Especially as you go on the road. Yep. Like you're about to go on the road for the first time in a while. So extended anyway, like since the season opened, this is going to be your first extended road trip. You want to feel good about yourself. So now you want to build that up as well. And then you can figure out the rest. Like genuinely, I thought there was a possibility that the next time Kolosov got a start was going to be San Jose, because you line it up. You go, oh, there's the one. That's the game I can put him in.
Yep.
I just
Well,
would have given him one more somewhere in there,
right.
scatter it in with that one. Like, I think they play Buffalo toward the end of that week. I'm like, that's a good idea. Playing him against Chicago would be a good idea. And then you finally, because if you're going to sit back and go, well, I need him for back-to-backs. You don't have a back-to-back until the Black Friday game and then the Saturday after.
Right. And
what are you going to do? Wait to
right?
play in St. Louis and then say, now you start a game after Ersson would have started, what, 11 in a row?
Right, and based on the rumors we've heard, that might be too late anyway. But
well, it wouldn't have mattered. The point was that if you do that, you're going down the path of last year, which is problematic.
Well, and so I've been tweeting as a bit of a joke from the YWT account at YWT Podcast.
You tweeting as a joke from the account?
Kolosov when? Well, and apparently the answer is Kolosov now. Because Sam Ersson, as we mentioned, has exited Saturday's game with an injury.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bit of a weird circumstance because the blade got knocked out, and then he was fine, and then the trainer came out and put the blade back on, and then the next commercial break he wasn't fine. He ended up coming out. We don't know exactly what's going on. The team has called it lower body. The only thing I've seen as far as an update, and I will ask the team insider next here, but I saw a report that Elliot Friedman said the Flyers are looking at about a week. That's all I know.
Sure.
Kevin, do you know anything here? Is it a foot? Is it a hamstring? Is it a knee? Do we know anything about anything?
No, because after the game we got so we got basically nothing at first. So here's how the timeline of events played out. He leaves the game. We're all kind of wondering what's going on. He just had the equipment issue. So he leaves the game. We're wondering what's going on. In between the first and the second period, the broadcast says he's still back in the room. It is an injury. And Ivan Fedotov can serve as the emergency backup. And he's suiting up right now to stay in the room to be ready just in case. Okay, fine. Then we find out probably, I think it was either around second period, mid-second period, end of second period, somewhere in that range. Now the Flyers have an official update, and the update is about as vague as it gets because he left the game with the train. Again, it was something about leaving with an injury of some sort, and we hope to have an update after the game.
Nobody loves their vague injury updates like the NHL.
I just think that they weren't willing to just go there right now at that point.
No, they never did.
We never even made it into the locker room before PR yelled out to everybody, basically, it's lower body. Okay, it's lower body. We got it's the typical injury designation.
We could kind of tell that based on how he left the ice. Obviously, we don't want to make
typical injury designation, correct. And then John Tortorella gave us the even less specific body. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
We got lower body already. Thank you. I get it. Based on, because we were sitting upstairs and must have watched the clip where he comes out 20 times trying to figure out what it may be.
We're going to overanalyze everything.
He takes the shot that knocks the skate blade out pretty much right off the toe.
Yeah.
And so one of our wonders, and again, this is just pure speculation, was honestly, it could be anything from if it's in a spot where, again, it's in a spot where maybe the toes are a little less protected. And if you take the boot off, then it could swell up a little bit. So it could be something like a bruise. It could be, honestly, we even speculated that just because of the area it was, because it hit it so flush and didn't, all that, he could have simply, in that moment as he signals, he could have lost feeling for a little bit. And it's just, it's kind of like a sting. Now, I think it's a little bit more than that because if he's going to miss close to a week.
Well, but here's the thing, though. The Flyers are also in a unique situation. It's the early season.
Mm-hmm.
You're not really expected to make the playoffs. You have 3 goalies currently on your NHL roster anyway. Could this be a case of just being cautious? Like if Kolosov's still in Lehigh Valley and you have to call someone up to replace Sam Ersson, maybe it's a little different. But if you already have 2 goalies here and you want to get a look at Kolosov and Fedotov a little more closely anyway, do you just give Sam the road trip off as a bit of a just give him a break? It's November.
It's possible. Like I imagine there's gonna be a little bit more formal of an update on Monday when they practice again.
Mhm.
I would be curious to like find out what like. Look, I'd be surprised if he practices on Monday, but I wouldn't be shocked if he goes on the road trip and finds a way to skate before the end of the week, especially if they think. Depends on how loosely you want to determine the about a week part, if that's what it is. Like, is about a week like, hey, by Friday he could practice again and Saturday he could play? If that's the case, then maybe he goes. If it's not, and you're starting to target when you're back home anyway, do you let him just skate around at home when he's
Well,
ready?
that's what I was thinking is I think you just give him the road trip off, let him hang out in Philly, and then if he's ready to go, if this is indeed a bruise, hopefully,
They don't want to
then
do that though.
then you give him San Jose as a bit of a rehab start.
Yeah, I mean, but like if there's even the slightest chance he plays on this road trip, they're not going to do it.
I don't disagree with you because I know that how John Tortorella is, and like we've talked about the fact that he is going to put the best roster on the ice to attempt to win the game as often as he can. And
Well, like let's put
I
it this
don't
way too.
blame him for that. That is
Let's
his job.
and let's put it this way to follow up on the point, like this, because this is less about Ersson at this point. Like, if regardless of what the timeline is, I doubt he's playing Tuesday, and I doubt he probably plays Thursday. If you're
I
going to
agree.
stick to that about a week thing, I think at minimum you can talk about maybe Saturday, maybe if it's not something overly serious. If it feels like a more day to day thing, and as long as he feels good, right? But my
Quite
point,
frankly, I don't want a even mildly compromised goalie within 100 meters of the Florida Panthers.
sure, I get. Well, who cares at this point though? Like, too, like it might
Sure.
like at this rate, if that is that not pretty much scheduled loss anyway, no matter who's in goal right now.
I mean, sure, it's the
But
third game of a little swing. Yeah, absolutely.
okay, but anyway, so Kolosov comes in on Saturday and then finished the game with 20 saves on 22 shots and looked pretty good, all things considered. Had a few moments where it wasn't pretty. He's shaky at times, but he made some saves that I thought for sure, like, oh, this is an opportunity that's going in the net just because, Flyers backup, right? Like, it's been the way it is. He made some good saves. He helped keep them in a game that if they could have found some thread of offense, they might have been able to pull out in some way, even get a point in something, like to your point about how they played maybe after the second Bruins goal in that game. If they get a goal before the end of the second period, I think there's
That's
a
the game.
chance they might tie that game up and get a point out of it. And Kolosov would have been a key reason for it.
I think the
Absolutely.
momentum is rolling downhill at that point, and I think there's a good chance that they come
Well,
back
because
and
you
win.
can't score. If you're not
Yeah.
scoring in general, I mean, we're talking about a team that to that point had scored 3 goals into a tended goal all week.
Yeah, hockey is magic because like every goalie is the walrus from the commercial until he's not, until he gives up the goal. And then every goalie is beatable 6 times. Like it's
Pretty
crazy just
much.
how this game
It
works.
can be.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at though is that so I look at his game and I say, certainly now I want to see him again. I want to see another Kolosov start to just see, even if he loses the game, even if he gets like, I would be totally satisfied knowing the level of competition you are playing this week. If he goes in and let's say if he can face 30 shots against Carolina and give up 3 goals, I'd be thrilled with that. Knowing
Oh yeah.
what kind of talent level Carolina has, knowing that they are starting to pick it up, and knowing that the Flyers are trying to solve more than just worrying about who's playing goal at this point. I think you
Sorry.
take that every day, especially if what he also needs to have is if he can have a game like his first start against Montreal, there's not enough shot volume to allow for you to give up 4 and one of them be kind of soft.
I agree.
He had a
This
good enough game in relief, taking away the fact that if he would have played the whole game and Boston gets their 30 shots and he gives up 2, then he had a really good game. He doesn't face the shot volume completely, but I took no issue with the goals that he allowed ultimately because one's kind of a broken play. He's got to try to make a desperation save because of a good bounce, and it happens to go through because the guy puts it on net. And then the other one I had more criticism over everything that led up to the goal more than the goal itself in terms of what the goalie's doing. I knew that goal was trouble, or that situation was trouble, from the second that you were at the end of a line change. You really needed to find a way to get off the ice in that spot with the long change. Boston was trying to change in that moment. Marchand's going to make something out of nothing because he's staying out for a long shift. Disaster. You need to find a way to figure that situation out and not give up a chance like that with a guy coming fresh off the bench. And you do, and it's a goal. Like, I'm not faulting the goalie for that, and I hope that I can have maybe a couple games this week where I feel that way. And I don't know, maybe Fedotov gets a game out of this. Like,
Yeah,
maybe
well,
they don't want to go over the
I was gonna
top
say,
with it.
I think Fedotov has to get a game this week. I think the problem is you're looking at this and you'd like to give him the softest game, but
Which
is the
one is it?
softest game Tampa? That feels terrible. Like,
I know, right?
I do think you're gonna see both goalies this week. I think this is a real big test for Kolosov. Like, you're coming in and you're gonna know you're the starter several days in advance. You're gonna have your full routine. You're not getting called up from the minors the day before. You're not coming in relief. Like, you're the guy for this week. If Sam Ersson's not on this trip or not in these first two games, you're the guy.
Right.
It's time, man. We gave this player a lot of grief over the summer for wanting exactly this, right? For wanting a shot, for wanting a chance to start at the NHL level.
Yeah.
Well, Alexei, you got it. Don't screw it up. Like, this is it, man. This is your opportunity. This is your chance.
Give me 1 second too, because like I can't just go back and like play it, obviously. But let me
Yeah.
go back and see if I can't grab the from the game yesterday his transcript, because he did speak after the game with
Okay.
they brought Slava down, the translator.
Right. Well, and I'm sure he's excited. Well, I'll riff a little bit while you're pulling this up, but
Well, because one of the questions that was asked, this is where I'm coming from with this. One of the questions that was asked of him was about what is it that you are trying to work on, basically. And I do really want to get into that, because that I thought was a very important part of
yeah. When and while you're finding that, I'm just going to mention the fact that, well, Tuesday you're going to get an opportunity, right? You got Sebastian Aho, you got all of these talented players in Carolina. You're going to see some good shots. You're going to see some offense. This is a really good team. You know, Shane Gostisbehere is lighting the world up on fire down in Carolina, and it's a good opportunity for Kolosov to prove himself. Right? This is when he comes over midway through training camp and says, you know, I'm just gonna get in line, basically, and I'm gonna wait my turn, and I'm gonna, you know, go play in Lehigh Valley if that's where you send me, and eventually I'll work my way up to the NHL roster. This is it. This is the opportunity you've been waiting for, and I'm very interested to see how he takes it. Like I said, with the full preparation in mind, right? He probably knows now that he's starting on Tuesday night, and he can go through his game day prep, and he can go through his routine, and he can theoretically be at his best. So it'll be interesting to see what we get out of the kid.
right. I don't so there it doesn't look like there's actually a written transcript in there for it. So like, bottom line was, like, one of the things I remember him talking about was he was trying to work on dealing with traffic in front of the net.
Can the Carolina Hurricanes provide traffic in front of the net? Holy.
I'm thinking about even the other games too. Like, Florida's like
Florida.
specialty at that. You know, if that's the game, if that's the game you want to give them, you know what I mean?
Florida won the cup from 5 feet away from the net. What are you talking about?
Exactly.
Seemed like every goal in that run was scored from under the face-off dots. Or in the slot, or in the paint, or
well, this is the thing, right? So like, I feel like now, like at this point, because I want to talk about, like, at this point, like, we know what they're like. I feel like every week we've done the show since the season started, I've come on, I've talked about what the record is and like things like that and where this is headed and things like this, because they're 4-7-1 through 12 games. And now this is the interesting part, and this is I'll put a positive spin on this, because I know you've been pretty much trying to find the positive of this, and I'm like, I'm being Mr. Reality Check this week.
You've listened to this show, you know that I'm the orange tinted sunglasses guy.
Do you have any? I'll ask you. Do you know what their record was through 13 games last year?
It was pretty similar, wasn't it? Like they had a bit of a stumble out the gate, and then they lit on fire.
They were
Right?
actually so when they this is where I'm going to go with this. When they won 2 games to start the week and all of a sudden went from 2-6-1 to 4-6-1, they were right
The
back
same
on.
record through 11.
They were right back on track to potentially be through 13 games just like last year, 5-7-1. That's the record. Okay. Now, why am I picking game 13 last year as a marker?
That's when they hit the launching pad, right? Like after that is when they were one of the best teams in hockey for 2 months.
It is when it started, but there's a very specific reason as to why I focus in on that game that made there was I'll spare you some of it because
I do not remember.
Well, no, you might as I start to talk about it.
Okay.
Game 13 was a loss.
Okay.
So it moved them to 5-7-1, and it was not just that they lost, it involved how they lost, or that's the best way I can put it, how they lost, that made a lot of people think something, like have an opinion, like if you weren't sure, if you were on the fence, kind of like we've been doing for the last several shows, if you were on the fence, people made up their minds after this game. Oh, I know what kind of year we're getting. And then they reeled off 5 straight wins after this. Do you know? The game was when they lost to the winless San Jose Sharks.
Yes. Okay.
And after that game was over, there was a lot of reason to believe. You mean to tell me that the Flyers are the team that lost to the winless?
Can't even beat the Sharks, right? Because the Sharks had just gotten 10 spots put on them like twice in the previous week.
Bingo. Exactly. Yep. So they still have a chance if they can beat Carolina in Carolina on Tuesday to match that record. To me, I look at it and I go, it's under different circumstances because, so first of all, you're like I brought up with you're playing the winless San Jose Sharks last year. You lose the game, you fall to 5-7-1, and that was what felt like where it felt like the true colors were coming out. It felt like they were showing this is who we are. We can't beat this. We can't even beat the winless team. So what happens now, right?
Oh, I was full Dennis Green. They are who we thought they were. Absolutely.
Right. And it and funny enough, now see that for us anyway, that game happened early in the week. It was a Tuesday, I believe. So they played later in the week, and it's like, yeah, I know they lost to the Sharks, but then they went out and they had 2 really good games to finish off a California trip. So maybe we were being a little harsh about it. They just beat the Ducks. The Ducks, who
we already had time to turn the corner on it. By the time
and then a week later, you asked me, "Are they good?"
Right? Are they actually good? And then I continued to ask that question until roughly mid-February.
Right. So this is where I'm going with this, though. When you look at where the team was in the standings then versus where they are now, it's relatively similar in 2 areas. When they lost to the Sharks to go to 5-7-1 last year, and it was through play on November 7th, I believe was the date. I don't have that part written down, but I believe that was the date. They're
doing it again, huh?
Well, just hold on. They were 7th in the division at that time. And now at this moment, they are 8th or last. They were ranked 14th in the conference then. They are 16th or last at the moment. But that's not like a far jump, right? 2 spots is not, or 1 spot in the division is not crazy. It's at most, it's a couple of spots. In the league as a whole, the Flyers ranked 24th in the league at that time at 5-7-1 last season.
Right.
This season, that has them ranked 31st out of 32 teams. So the foundation is really set here for the Flyers to be a potential bottom feeder, because even putting the positive spin on the week, they won a couple of games. The balance is, they won a couple of games. You should feel good about winning a couple of games. They got 4 points to start this week. But the balance has remained among the rest of the teams in the standings, that even with a couple of wins, they're still 1 spot from the bottom of the standings. They were possibly 30 seconds away from being the bottom of the standings technically. The Sharks were playing Vancouver last night, tied the game with like a minute and a half left, looked like they were going to force overtime, and lost in regulation in the final minute still. to stay 1 point behind the Flyers. If they tie, if they get the overtime point and then are tied, San Jose would have still been considered 32. But if San Jose would have found a way to win that game in overtime, the Flyers would have technically woken up this morning considered the last place team in the league. And now the schedule gets tougher. You're going to play Carolina, Tampa, and Florida. That's the teams ranked 9th, 10th, and 2nd in the league. As the Flyers go forward without arguably their most consistent defenseman, without their primary starting goalie, with their star prospect and the rest of the offense in a scoring slump that outside of the 7-goal outburst last week against Minnesota, they have scored 23 goals in the other 11 games, which is a whopping 2.09 per game, while allowing 44 goals over 12 games played, which is 3.67 per game. Now, I will give you something that you said earlier in the show that I did not have here because I looked at it as a broad in 12 games, you're giving up between 3 and 4 per game. That is problematic. Defensively this week, they were way better than they had been in a while. I agree with that. They've played with more structure this particular week. But the offensive thing, and I think we got to get into that at this point, that has been the area of the problem. And I'm going to read off something to you that I looked up last night that I think contributes big time to this, or at least is one of the biggest factors that you can pull from this, okay? Because they won, like I said, they won 2 games this week playing defensively, blocking a lot of shots, getting the goaltending. And as much as I can agree with John Tortorella that sometimes if you play to your identity and, do those things that you're good at, it can help with offense at times. The fact of the matter is their offense is not good enough. And it's not even like it's just to sit there and talk about the guys that we've already brought up and other guys that we can refer to, your Owen Tippett's, Travis Konechny's had a cold spell, Tyson Forrester not getting as much to start the year, Joel Farabee, Bobby Brink, Morgan Frost, you name it. The list goes on. We've said the same names for the last 3 years, pretty much, right? It's not like it's guys like that are getting a lot of chances and just not finishing. The Flyers.
There's some of that. There is some of that. They've had
some, but this is. I just want you to hear me out because this is the biggest difference from last year to this year so far.
Okay.
The Flyers are averaging this season 25.7 shots per game. That's ranked 30th in the league.
Sounds about right.
They do a good job of not allowing a ton of shots either. They're allowing 27.6 per game, which is tied for 7th, but they just don't generate enough. So last season, if we ever had conversations about, the offense, they got guys who just aren't finishing right now, and the offense doesn't have that goal scoring type, right? Or whatever, right? We talk about that all the time. What they lacked in talent and finishing ability, they made up for in volume. They averaged 33 shots per game last season, which was tied for 4th in the league. So at this point in the season, that's down over 7 shots per game. And at least 3 games in particular, the last 3, have been noticeable because it's not even like they're getting to 25 to hit close to the average mark. They want to.
If Owen Tippett could hit the net, they'd be at their average.
Oh, John Tortorella said missing the net is an epidemic, and he's right about that. I get it. But I don't feel like they're even attempting as many shots lately.
Yeah. I think
the last 3 games,
it almost feels like through the first half dozen or so games, they weren't getting the bounces. And then the second, the more recent half of the season, they've been waiting too long, looking for the perfect shot. There's just not enough volume.
Sure. And let's put it this way. They actually scored in the first period on Thursday, so I can't really use this, but they didn't score until almost midway through the second, early-ish to midway in the second period against Boston. You go through an entire period and start to get into the middle portion of the second period, you're doing the same thing in a 0-0 game where you're looking for the perfect play. They ended up with 19 shots on goal in Boston. They ended up with 21 shots on goal against the Blues, and then 20 on Saturday in the loss to Boston. And even if they would have won on Saturday in another 3-2, 2-1 style game, what they are doing, what they did to get the 2 wins earlier in the week, and what they're doing to this point it's just not sustainable. You can enjoy the result briefly and the fact that you got a few points out of the standings, but the fact still remains like about where this team is and with the lack of offensive firepower, the lack of
Not enough
goals,
talent on the roster.
right? And like the lack of goals is always going to be frustrating, but like they have several guys that to me look like they don't have any confidence with the puck.
I agree.
I give Owen Tippett credit because he keeps trying to get to the right areas, usually has the shot volume that other guys don't have or misses the net too much, like you brought up. And like I said, it's good that Tyson Forrester scored this week. It's good that Bobby Brink scored. It's good that Joel Farabee got an empty netter that feels like a reward for playing a little bit better, generally speaking. But there's still like Morgan Frost has given you next to nothing. Travis Konechny's gone cold lately. Michkov's gone cold lately. No points in 4 straight games. We're getting to a point in this season where it's more of a definition of what the team is. If you get to the end of this month, if you get to Thanksgiving and and the Flyers are, because of this, primarily because of this lack of scoring, if we look up and they're 8-14-3 and at 25 games in and the standings position is bottom 5 in the league, doesn't that say what they're going to be this year?
Well, and we have beaten this horse for months and months and months at this point. How many centers did you name there? One, and you mentioned him in a negative light?
It's not even about mentioning him in a negative light.
And I just mean, what I'm saying is that the team is very thin up the middle. Sean Couturier has looked fine, has looked a little bit better recently, right? Since he scored and kind of got off the schneid. He's been a little better. The whole team is still struggling to score. And then you have Morgan Frost, who is streaky, who isn't always in the coach's best graces.
Well, I go off of also, and I like, because when I look at the whole week in general, they scored the 7 goals against Minnesota. And then I kind of categorize the Montreal game as they scored 1 until like 2 goals in 20 seconds right at the end when it felt like the game was over. So I don't even like, I kind of go off of that one with a goalie in net in Boston, 2, and then none. And as I go through that stretch of games, like, sure. And I'm not trying to like make this like, oh, that he would have transformed the offense or anything, but like, it's not lost on me that outside of the 7-goal outburst, that's also 4 games that they've played without having the ability to say, hey, Jet Lachenko, let's put you in and see if you do anything to stir up some energy in the lineup. I'm not denying that part either. They're thin up the middle, like you said. Like, there's no taking that away. And honestly, it's why I'm prepping myself anyway, and I'm hoping I'm trying to prep the fans in this respect. I'm prepping people for listen, you've got to be ready for bottom 5 material because honestly, you should want it at this point. Look at all the centers in this draft. I don't know if these centers are ready for the NHL immediately after this season, but they're not
going to get them in the system.
Not even that. You can't tell me it's going to take long. Not with the roster as thin as it is at center. Like if Jet Lachenko picked 13th overall this year, made enough noise to get a tryout, imagine
almost made the roster.
Well, like imagine dropping the 1 from that and saying I picked a center 3rd overall this year. When do you think he's going to be?
He's on the team.
I wouldn't go that far. I'm saying it's within 2 years. Like it's if it is not immediately, it's the next season. It's the who's the guy I'm looking for? It's kind of the Travis Konechny route.
Okay.
Konechny took 1 more year at juniors after he was drafted, and then like so did Ivan Provorov actually. Like they both had 1 year after the draft year. They played a draft plus 1 year where everybody in Flyerland watched them from afar, and then they were here, right?
Okay.
I feel like that's the path you're going to be down because that's where it's going to be. And like I very much envision with that group of centers that you can talk about at this point that are like the draft eligible guys. I very much envision a San Jose Sharks approach where you're going to come in, and if it's not next year in general, it will be like it's very distinctly possible if you have a kid who's good enough out of the draft next year because you pick that high that you could have that player and Lachenko go full time at the same time.
Well, and the other thing worth mentioning, and they're coming out of it a little bit, is that the Flyers own the Colorado Avalanche first round pick next year. Obviously, it's protected, but If that pick ends up at 11 or 12 and you end up with 2, 3, 4 and also 11 or 12, there you go. Bang bang. Like you can add
Right.
2 guys to your roster within 18 months.
Right. Well, the longer, like I'm looking at the standings now, just generally speaking, the longer that Edmonton and Colorado stay down there, like one of the best, one of the best things that could happen is
Edmonton's already kind of.
They're going up, but Connor McDavid got hurt and is going to miss a few weeks.
Yeah, but what happens when that happens? Leon wins the Hart. Like
it's still one guy though, and like if you know what I'm saying, like all I'm saying is
they got Zach Hyman going. Listen, I
Zach Hyman
understand
just
that
scored his first goal, so it better get him going, I guess, for their sake. But like,
I understand what you're saying, but I can't imagine they're staying down here too much longer, to be honest.
I'll give you one reason they do stay down there longer.
Okay.
You just lost your superstar player in McDavid, who can, and I'm not taking away from Draisaitl, who has that same ability, but I'm saying
Sure.
McDavid's the take over the game guy when it really gets down to it, right? You just lost him, and what if you're the team, you know, that the goaltending is just that poor that you're giving up 4 a night? If you don't get the goaltending and have to score, like imagine having to score 4 or 5 a night now without McDavid. You want McDavid to take over the game that you need to win. Like, perfect example. When it came down to it, you're playing the Flyers. It's a 3-2 game. You're losing. And now you need McDavid to be McDavid. Go win us a game 4-3 with a minute and a half left or 3 minutes left or whatever, right?
And they got a tough week too. They got Calgary, New Jersey, Vegas, and Vancouver. 4 solid teams.
So, right. So
especially with Calgary on their turnaround.
Right. Well, not only that, but it's already an energetic game. That's a rivalry game. Then you bring up the other teams that are all ranked where they are. Exactly.
That's a tough schedule. No, it's a tough week for them. But the thing is, though, looking at their division, like they're gonna make the playoffs.
Well, and okay, and here's the thing. I know that people are gonna look at the standings and be like tempted by what's going on, like because I think where Edmonton isn't Edmonton in like the perfect spot right now. Like that if Edmonton picked where they are, that's the pick the Flyers would still get. Then otherwise it's top 12 protected.
Something like that. Yeah.
Right. So my point is that like as nice as that is, do not tempt fate here with those teams miss the playoffs, go into the lottery, and if they jump in any way, they get to keep their pick.
The Oilers are only 2 points out of a playoff spot right now.
No, I know. What I'm saying is that what you want them to do is what you would love at this point is if Edmonton and Colorado took these slow starts and became your wild cards.
Oh, I agree.
Because wild cards, if they get knocked in the first round because they're not as good as everybody thought,
you end up with like 15 and 17.
Pretty much. I think it would be
17 and 18.
Pretty close.
Depending on where they fall.
You would probably end up with both picks being still within the top 22. How does that sound?
You end up with 2 picks that are good enough to use or good enough to combine and move. Like you can do a lot of stuff with those picks. Well, those are trading up picks if you want to trade up.
I think what you do in that situation is you start to turn it into let's just hypothetically say I have 18 and forget about the first round pick that we're talking about from another team. I'm also going to be sitting on, let's say 35.
Oh, 35. Okay.
And I'm into the early second round and I'll take those 2 because I really, really, really want to get to 13.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
And that's the sort of thing I'm talking about is that these are premium enough assets that you can turn them into really quality pieces.
Like,
in theory.
And I'll revisit this as it gets closer to the draft because the order of names could shift over that time. Like, here's where I'm going with this. If I'm trying to pick a center and I've got a top 5 pick, I've already got like 4 names on this list.
Hagen, there's Michael Misa. There's a couple.
And Misa kind of qualifies as like he's been listed as all sorts of things. He's listed as a left winger. He's listed as a center. It's all over the board.
He'll probably be a wing at the NHL.
There are 2, like outside of Hagen's, there are like 2 or 3 other centers that are listed as centers that I go, if you're picking 4th and that's the guy, I'm still good with this. You know, like that still has that kind of vibe to it. Right.
And well,
I don't like where I'm going with this is that I don't know how it's going to look when I look at defensemen down the line. Like right now there's defensemen that are hovering at say like 16 to 20 range that I go, man, if they could get with that guy too, like sounds like one of the better defensemen in the draft too. And now you can come away like, what if you came away with one of the better centers and one of the better defensemen and had something to build on here? Like, let's make no bones about this here. If you've got 3 first-round picks and potentially intend to use all of them, you need to come away with a Chicago Blackhawks, San Jose Sharks kind of draft, right? And I'm not talking about like whoever the first name that you roll off is.
It's
last year,
gotta be better than the Boston Bruins 11, 12, 13 that yielded like Jacob Zaboral and Jake DeBrusk.
That yielded
players
that yielded 3 players that are no longer Boston Bruins at this stage of the thing, right? Like DeBrusk was the one guy they got that did stick, and then they had what? Zaboral was one of them, and Senyshyn was the other, and it was like
Senyshyn, wasn't it? Yeah, okay.
And Senyshyn was barely there. Zaboral was there for a decent chunk and was no more than a third pairing guy.
And DeBrusk left in free agency as an established veteran. That's not on the team. Like
DeBrusk was also like, I'm not trying to take away, like Zaboral probably was too. I'm not saying he wasn't, but like DeBrusk played a key role in a team that got to a cup final.
If Boston doesn't make the playoffs this year, I think losing Jake DeBrusk is a big reason why. Speaking of making the playoffs this year, we do roll kind of 1 week closer. We're looking kind of at the draft and the playoffs, and we're looking way ahead. Let's look a little tighter at the week ahead.
Okay.
We do have that Tuesday night game in Carolina. We have a Thursday night game in Tampa, and then a Saturday night game in Florida, in Sunrise. Like we mentioned, it's a tough week. You're going to be relying on Kolosov, maybe Fedotov at some point. Maybe you get Cam York at some point. Oh, no, you can't get Cam York back until the end of it. It's going to be a tough week.
Yeah.
It's going to be a tough week.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, and here's okay. Since again, Mr. Positive on the other side here, I'll pull out a positive for you as the week is going on, because you brought up Cam York. You got to say his call up is doing well.
Oh, Emil Andre
has had a very solid week and looks the part of an NHL defenseman. So now you've got some maybe
Emil Andre should never play a game for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms again.
Maybe right now you don't have a decision to make. Okay, here's where I'll level with you. Like if they were to send him back and he gets to play top pairing again down there, I don't think it's detrimental here. But okay, I don't
think he's in your top 4. It's the NHL level.
Hold on, hear me out. Yeah. I don't think it does anything to him personally, whether he goes back or not. If we're going to sit here and do the evaluation game, he's got to stay.
I agree.
That's my point. Like
I want him on your second pair. Like I want him. What do
you want him in, a Jamie Drysdale role next to Nick Seeler? They're not going to put him up with Sanheim because it's just.
I would love to see Sanheim and Seeler work. I don't know if it does, but I would love to see Sanheim and Seeler work, because I not Sanheim and Seeler. I'm sorry.
Drysdale and Seeler?
I'd love to see Sanheim and Drysdale work. Now, Travis Sanheim has never been able to play with a number 9, but here we are.
I love how that's how you want to take that.
Listen, because I think that would set you up for Seeler Andre as your ideal second pair. And then you have Ristolainen and whoever on the third pair, maybe York even on the third pair at that point, or maybe it's York and Andre as your second pair with Seeler and Ristolainen as your third. Whatever it is, I think Emil Andre is the type of guy who, at this point in his career, while we're trying to get a look and evaluate him, could be getting top 4 minutes.
Let me ask you a question based on what you're trying to evaluate. Are you also looking for that spot after York comes back? Because you mentioned York in there, obviously. Like I'm saying, are you looking for that spot afterwards, or like are we talking just right now while you try to bridge the gap until York gets back?
I think right now he's there until York gets back, but if he continues to play well, I don't think he's the one who gets bumped when York returns.
Because here's where I'm going with this, or where my mind went to. The reason why the reason why I think they keep Drysdale Seeler together, and the reason why I would also, is because I think Nick Seeler is a cover-up. Like Nick Seeler is there to try to mask mistakes from a defenseman who hasn't figured it out yet. I look. The reason why Emil Andre playing with Eric Johnson has kind of worked is because Andre's good enough to actually carry that pair.
Right, defensively, right? Yeah, no.
And generally speaking, he's a better puck mover.
Yeah.
There are times where sometimes there are times where Drysdale goes to do something maybe, and I don't know who the better guy is on that pairing to do all of those things. Sealer might be moving the puck better. Sealer came back and has been playing with Drysdale as far as I know since the beginning of all this, right? Because they bumped first the line and after the injury. Sealer's the one who jumped up on a play and scored a goal against Minnesota, not Drysdale.
Sealer. So Travis Sanheim's been your best defenseman, especially recently.
Big picture, yes.
But Sealer Drysdale is your best pair.
See, but I haven't liked Drysdale's game much at all. I think Sealer carries that pair. Like Sealer is the next. Like if I'm going to put the arguably Cam York is your most consistent defenseman stamp on when he goes out,
maybe Drysdale bumps to the third pair for now.
But what I'm saying is that so now we're mixing it all up all over the place though, because I don't want Nick Sealer playing third pair minutes right now. I want Nick Sealer playing top 4 minutes because he's
no. I know. I'm saying you bump Drysdale out of the top 4.
I cannot, based on what I have seen, throw
the line in Drysdale.
No, it's not that. Right now it would be Drysdale Johnson.
No, that's fair.
I cannot throw that pairing out there right now. I'm sorry.
See, but I think Johnson's been solid. I think Johnson could be for Drysdale what he's been for.
Yeah, but I think that Johnson's going to. I think Drysdale's been that bad to start the season. I'll just flat out say it.
Oh, he has been, absolutely. But the good news is it's a John Tortorella team, so we'll probably see combinations of everything. Frankly, the lines have been in the blender.
And here's the other thing too, about bumping Drysdale back. They know how much they need to And I think they know beyond just what he represents based on age and experience level and what potential from even from when he was drafted. I think it goes so far beyond that about how much they need this to work. Not just because he was a 6th overall pick, not just because he's 22, not just because, he's got all those qualities, right? Has nothing to do with that. I think it has. And it's like the unspoken part of the equation has to do with what did you do to get him?
Yeah, but Cutter Gauthier hasn't scored yet, so who cares?
Even so, it doesn't matter. It's like then at this point, it doesn't matter, does it?
Not really.
You almost have to bring that fact up to justify how both sides of this picture have looked.
I said it as a joke for the record.
No, I know, but you know what I'm saying? I almost feel like that's the reason why I see it is because, Cutter Gauthier has no goals yet, only a handful of points. What was he got? 4 assists?
Something like that, and it took a while.
Which honestly is okay for a guy who's played all of 10 games this year.
Man, I gotta say, Flyers Twitter is fun right now. We have beef with the Ducks for Cutter Gauthier. We have beef with the Habs for Lane Hudson. We have and Demidov. That
was more of what I was going to say. What beef is with Lane Hudson?
Well, so Hudson is being compared to Michkov because he's here. Right, Demidov's the guy who's not here yet, but Hudson's the Calder Trophy.
Everybody's being compared to Michkov up there because let's put it this way: what did it start as? It didn't even. Hudson's now getting it because he's here. Demidov's going to get it because he's another Russian. For a little while, it was Reinbacher because they were taken in the same draft. It's like, make up your mind to who you want to compare him to, or how about this?
Turns out Canadians fans might have a little bit of an issue with the fact that they didn't take.
How about this? Watch some Ivan Demidov highlights and be happy you have a guy like that too in your system.
And he's really good. Ivan Demidov is really, really, really good.
I watched the same discourse with, the Flyers didn't bother to try to trade up last year to go get Demidov. Or even if they said they wanted to, why didn't they pull the trigger on that? I don't know, because they couldn't.
But by the way, he's not Rookie of the Month for October, and Matvei Michkov is.
No, I know. Now that being
I just had to mention it. All right.
Now that being said, November is off to the start that it's off to, and it's like the wall's being hit a little bit, which is understandable.
It's all right.
I'm not worried about him at all. I'm not worried about him at all. I mean, how many times? I'm pretty sure it's specifically in the first Boston game. How many times did he attempt the lacrosse style thing?
4 or 5.
He's the guy who tries to make something, he wants to try to make something out of nothing in a lot of situations, and it's probably too much in the early going of his career, and he'll get there. I mean,
and John Tortorella talked about it. He got benched for a couple of shifts in the first period the other day.
Yeah, that was a pretty big deal in the moment.
And Tortorella talked about it and said, the kid's 19. He's getting used to the NHL. It's going to take
Correct.
some time. He said he's going to take some shifts off. He might even take a couple of games off. And he kind of soft launched the Torts scratching Michkov thing. And I'm okay with it. For the record, I am not complaining about it.
The only reason I wouldn't
But
be at this
people will complain when it
well,
happens.
the only reason I wouldn't be at this point is because you've got no offense. Like,
I agree. Well, right, but he's not providing it. So like scratching him to hopefully get some offense in the next game from him, it's more of a long-term investment thing.
I hear you. I think it's going too far with the pushing of the buttons again. It also becomes like at some point in time, like we have to also recognize at some point in time, like John Tortorella can push whatever buttons he wants to and develop however he wants to. And I understand that it works well for a lot of players. I get it. You also have to have an understanding when you watch some of this stuff that John Tortorella is not going to be his coach forever. Probably not
the majority of his
probably not even through 3 years of his career.
Probably not on his next contract.
Right. Well, exactly.
Right.
And that's where I just go like a little bit where it's like, careful what you do with everything here, because this is the foundational stage of development. Just be careful. I'm not saying the kid can't handle it. I thought he handled the benching portion perfectly.
Well, and John gave him his power play time. Like he wasn't punishing the kid. He just kind of. But my thing is two things.
You could see the play too. Like you saw the play where he messed up.
John Tortorella would tell you, I'm doing what's best for this kid, whether I'm getting fired soon or not. And also, if I think scratching this kid is what's best, then I think that's what's best. And sometimes, and I don't even necessarily disagree, like, do I think Matvei Michkov, if healthy, should play 78 to 80 plus games this year? Yes, I do. But if he takes 1, 2, maybe even 3 games up in the press box throughout the course of the season, keep an eye on things, get a night off, let the legs rest, something along those lines, I think there is value to that.
I get it.
And again, 78 plus games. I'm certainly not saying.
And it doesn't mean that I'm not expecting him to get scratched at some point. I understand how that is likely to happen at some point. Just because of who the coach is, honestly. Like there is no, you don't have a coach who preaches accountability the way that Tortorella does, that doesn't involve, if I got to bench the kid, I'm benching the kid, and it might be for a full game. It absolutely happens that way. What I also just wonder about is like, you can talk about how it's a teaching moment right now. Like you even want, like, consider that you even won a couple of games and he didn't have anything to do with winning those 2 games per se. You even benched him. No. And you even benched him for like that extended period of time, like a handful of shifts in a game that you ultimately ended up winning and actually scored while he was benched, I believe.
Yep.
You know, by throwing your 4th line out there, no less. So there's an element to me where I don't like, I wonder if part of that still has to do with where we are in the season. And it's like, while I'm trying to win games, while I'm worried about what the standings could look like, I'm not saying Tortorella is looking at the standings and definitively going, this is why I'm doing this stuff.
But you're trying to accumulate points in the early season.
Because back to the point about being 5-7-1 through 13 last year, you reel off a winning streak, you might go from being wherever to here, right?
True, I'm second in the division, right?
Like it honestly is the same equation that you had with Edmonton and Colorado, where it's like, just because the records say what they say and the standings say what they say, all they got to do is win a few games in a row and they're back in the playoff race like they typically were expected to be, right?
And obviously those teams are a little more well equipped to do so.
No, but what I'm saying is that how many times did the Flyers, even over the years, have I even wrote down some of like over the years, I think I even went back to before I even started covering the team. That's how far back I can go with this, where it's how many years did they have something that went wrong? Can I tell you for fun, part of the reason why I started writing this down?
Okay.
Because when they had lost 6 in a row through 7 games, I was bracing myself for, are we going to get to 10? Because I was counting.
Yep.
Okay, what years did they have the 10-game losing streaks? And I pinpointed where they were, because ironically,
was it 16 and 18? Something like that.
What do you mean?
Was it 2016 and 2018, the 10-game losing streaks?
They had one in 2018.
2018.
They might have had one in 2016. It just was later on, and I didn't bother going there, or it didn't reach 10, but it was a big number anyway. I have 18, 22, or 21, 22, and 22, 23. So it's 17, 18, 21, 22, 22, 23 that had 10-game losing streaks. But one of those in there, and I might have just bypassed it in some way. One of those I thought had 2 of them at one point, or came dangerously close to having 2. But get this. In 2017-18, their 10-game losing streak came at 26 games into the season.
And then they made the playoffs.
That year, yes.
Yeah, they made the playoffs.
But that's the only.
The next year they had a 10-game winning streak and missed the playoffs.
Right. Well, that's the only year that you can say that they made the playoffs after a 10-game losing streak, at least.
Yep.
21-22, they had a 10-game losing streak and it was 24 games in. 22-23, they had a 10-game losing streak and it was 22 games in. They end up having one of these types of losing streaks. If they're going to have one, it tends to fall like first quarter.
Like they got it out of the way.
Like it's out of the gate pretty quickly. Now,
well, they got it out of the way real quick this year, right?
Right. Now, to your point, like every time I come away, by the way, with like, by the way, that number of wins and losses I gave earlier, that like, I'm like, oh, if they're this through 25, right? I just randomly generated that number based on like, let me pick how many games I think they could win over the next whatever it is. I didn't even look to realize that like the years I'm talking about with those 2 10-game losing streaks before they had the decent start last year after being 5-7-1 through 13, that their first 20 was 10-9-1 because they pulled off a winning streak.
Yeah.
They got through those 22 games in 22-23 and were like 7-10-5. In 21-22, they were 8-12-4 through 24. Like it's right in that range.
Yeah, and I remember one of those winning streaks. They were like 5-5. Like they still got 5 points out of it. It was wild. But
that probably that 22-23 one, because they were either that or it was the 2017-18 one, because the 10-game losing streak, they were 8-11-7 after it.
That was it then.
It was probably it.
Yeah, I remember that one because it was a Dave Hackstall team. It was roughly this time of year.
Yeah, I love it, Dave Hackstall.
Trying to convince ourselves that they were good, and
but because there's a slight element, like, and this is where we'll kind of put a bow on it. There's a slight element that's similar to the team that we just saw this week a little bit, where it's like you can't deny the fact that like sometimes they come out and they're just a boring team. It is what it is. Like, and I don't feel any better about like sitting here saying like they won 2 games against teams that were also kind of boring.
Well, and I do feel confident saying that the change is coming, right? Matvey Michkov represents that change, hopefully. Mm-hmm. And we will be 1 week closer to that change when we come back for next week's show. So that'll do it for us today. We do have a couple of road games this week to watch. So Kevin won't be at the Wells Fargo Center, but he will be on Twitter at Kevin_Durso. You can follow us at YWT Podcast. Find us everywhere you find your podcasts, including sportstalkphilly.com. And other than that, I think that'll do it. We'll be back next week with some easy games ahead to talk about. San Jose, thank goodness. Might be a tough week for the Flyers. We'll be back to talk about it. Until then, we'll see you. Get out there and vote. Important democracy.